Hey, what's up, dudes? Alright, we are restarting our extensions. I'm gonna set this timer here. We're gonna get our 68 minutes going. We're gonna try and get some coding done. I haven't been able to code the past few days because I'm a cover driver at my job, which means if they need me, I drive. And they usually don't need me, but they did, and I worked a lot actually. I did like 13 hours one day, 14 hours another day, like 8 hours on Saturday, so worked a lot, honestly. So we're back today though. Didn't drive today. They were gonna have me, but it just didn't work out. So here we are. And we're gonna try to knock out these last few tasks, because it has been challenging. We are very close, but we're not there yet. I haven't tested the game in like months. It's been a long time. It's been a very, very long time. And pause this so I can make sure I can actually check the audio. Okay, audio is good. The link works. Let's go. Alright. So, what did we do last time? We did reconnect logic. That was 4 days ago. We continue working on code to reconnect the client to the proper game. Mainly worked in network and client Pi. Specifically reviewed. Specifically reviewed token creation code and hash token Pi, improved fixed token send code in server Pi, and made final pass of token receive code in client Pi. Alright. We stopped at line 366 in client. So let's pick up there. Okay, so we said, should this be socket or something else? So we're saying con or end network socket send all. So this is in client. Whenever we start a new game, we receive the client token. It's a Python object, receives the header and associated object, corresponds to first server-side send. Okay. Was previously inside the end get client game ID, get client token, but we aren't using either of those anymore as they're determined to be bloat. Quite certain this line is necessary for proper while loop logic, either server-side or client-side. I can't remember exactly. And then we get our encoded verify received. So this is a send back to the server side to let them know that we indeed did receive the first send, and that lets the game proceed either on the server side or the client side. It's like server side logic. It requires this to to get things started. It's basically like lining them up at the starting line, and the race doesn't start until they get both clients send back this encoded verify received. Then we have con or n network socket send all, and basically I think what we verified, or not verified, we're gonna verify it, is that N network socket and con are exactly the same objects, and I think that's probably what we need to take care of first. Let me see what we got here. So current issue, add client token to initial CS receive. Add code in client, which includes the client token being received along with the client ID and game ID during the initial server-side CS. So that's not completely finished. Next, modify CS receive code such that it extracts the game ID. Ensure that, okay, yeah, but we also need to see about this here. We have, yeah, are these indeed interchangeable? That is the question. So, let's see here. We can just figure this out rather quickly. Search for con. So con equals n connect. And what does n connect return? N connect returns the self.network socket. So we get the self n.network socket connected to the endpoint, which would be the IP port combo, and then we return that network socket object equals socket object. So I always like to add that to my, it lets us know what we're actually receiving, you know? It's a good habit, I think, to have. There we go. Alright, so yeah, con and network socket are basically the same exact thing. Disabling as is replacing but determined to be below thereafter refactored version replacing below commented out version to account for a new hash token system. Ended up determining this was also below code as essentially just n receive plus the 2 lines that send. Therefore, use n receive plus 2 receive verifications. Would at least after verifying new coded client is valid. Okay. Blah 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 blah. Yeah. So we should use con instead because I mean it's shorter and simpler. Yeah. All right. We'll worry about like do we need that as an attribute? Blah blah blah. We could take care of that another time. But for now, we're just gonna use con and is this how we operate normally? Con? No. This is the only time we use con dot. Is that true? So normally we use n.receive and n.send because those internally handle creating the header and like breaking down the header and then receiving the actual object and stuff. So it's Consider adding logic here to account for whenever data was lost. So the issue here, well, one thing that I noticed, so normally we would use n receive, and do we use n.send? So we don't even use, how do we do send? Okay, so you do n.network socket send all. So couldn't we just say con.sendAll? And why don't we use n.send? So this is for sends out a receive verification. So for this send, we do n network socket and then send all, and we have message header plus the data, all as one object. Okay, and then we do the same thing in the case of receiving receive verification or resend request. So that's resend request. Okay, and then for this is when we receive a change attribute list. Well, no, this is when we send. This is when we send the change attribute list. Okay. We have n-network socket send all, message head plus the data. So we don't actually use network.send, like, at all. I don't think we use n-send at all. And I guess I don't know why, like, I don't even know. This is just vestigial, I think. I don't think we actually need this. And that was the question I was asking last time, is what's the difference between con send, like socket.send, and this network send? Like, why would we use network send as opposed to just socket send all? Because we're literally just calling socket send from nsend. It's just like a middle, it's a useless middleman. There's really no reason for it, at least that I can deduce. I don't like to delete code unless I know that it's well, I love to delete code, but I don't like to delete code until I know for sure that it is vestigial and that it is useless. So I would prefer not to use any middlemen. That's a big problem that I had in this project, was just like bloat and like, you know, not realizing that I could use this thing to also do this thing, or, you know, just maybe going a little too fast, whatever. So let's see if we actually use this end send. If we don't use it, we're just gonna disable it, and yeah, it's that simple. Okay. So let's look in client. We're gonna look for send. Okay, so not there. Not there. And this is con.send. So this is using socket send. This is not, to be clear, that is not end send. That's socket send. Okay, yeah, so we actually don't even use it. So it's verified as being vestigial. So what we can do is get rid of it. Well, we'll disable it first. That's how we usually do things. We disable it, and then eventually it gets all dusty and old, and we're like, why is this even still here? Blah, 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 and then we just get rid of it eventually. But, you know, sometimes you go back and you realize, hey, I actually do need this for XY reason, or it might just have a singular purpose. So we're going to say after review determined that this is vestigial, unused, and useless, as we already can just use socket.send our send all, which is what we currently use. So we're saying disabling after review, because we determined that this is vestigial, unused, and useless, as we already can just use, which is what we currently do. Leaving until I am 100% sure code is unnecessary. Alright, cool. So that's taken care of. Now we can go back over here to client, and let's look at our bookmarks here. What do we have bookmarked? Because I know I had a bookmark that I think, okay, so that's our only 2 bookmarks, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so we have con or nen and network socket. So we're going to use con send all, and we're sending the encoded verify received, and this is type is bytes. So then we just send the bytes. It's the verification. All right. What was the next thing that we wanted to say? Okay. Yeah, so we need to determine using con versus using n.network socket, because honestly, con is like simpler and more clear, especially when you use a namespace in a certain file. It's just, you know, it makes sense to use one and not 2 of them. So if con is literally n.network, so let me just make sure I'm real careful about this though. So this is in, what broader section is this in? This is in if name is equal to main, outer while loop. Okay, so this is the outer while loop. This is the very beginning of the game. We connect and we get con, and okay, And then once we get to the main while loop down here, which is... Oh, I missed it. Okay, here we go. So now we get to the main while loop. So con gets assigned up here in the outer while loop. We then move further and eventually we would run n connect for if they're reconnecting. And doesn't that return an object? Isn't that what n connect returns? Yeah, it returns the network socket. So then we'll say so shouldn't this be con equals n dot connect? Yeah, because that's going to be the means by which the data is transferred. So if that's for a reconnect. But what about when they start a new game? So this is for start a new game. So if they start a new game, con is set to n.network socket through nconnect. And then once we get to reconnect a game, okay, so we check it again for whatever reason. I'm guessing there's a reason that we do it separately. Then we would connect. Okay, so this would be basically, yeah, this would be where we would assign con if we were reconnecting. So connect new game, con is here, and then reconnect game, con assignment is there. And then we get to the main while loop, and from that point onward we use, we don't need to see any of this stuff. Why is this not collapsible? I don't know why, but we can collapse this. We can't. Why do we? Anyway, life goes on. I don't understand why we can't collapse that, but I guess there's a reason. Alright. Okay, so we do indeed use con here in the main while loop. If you see right here, technically this could be con as well, right? Like, that's what I'm looking at, is I want to have a universal namespace usage. I don't want to be using n network socket and con if they both refer to the same exact thing. I want to use one or the other, and I want to make sure I get it right, because just in case they are not the same exact thing, that is a big problem, right? So we have n receive taking in con, and the con there is the socket, right? Yes, okay, and that name needs to be changed. We're going to change that eventually, okay? It's in the works. And then we have, this is if ready 0, in receive, we pass in con. See, and then we use n.network socket, though, right here, for send all. So we're going back and forth. And I would like to not do that. I would like to just use one. I like my code to be clean. I do not like that sort of confusing stuff in my code. It's not good. And just to verify, yeah, that is the same thing. In network socket is literally con. I think, yeah, I've gone through this safely enough. I think it's safe to just go ahead and assume that every time we use the namespace n network connect, it is literally the same exact, or n.network socket. It's the same as typing con. So we're gonna replace that, and this code needs to be fixed. This needs to be con equals n connect, and this will return type is going to be a socket object, right? Yeah, socket object. Okay. So, and this is the proper location. Like, this is not overwriting another operation. This is not duplicate. That handles if you're reconnecting, that's where it connects, and if you're connecting to a new game, this is where it connects. So there's the if, then there's the elif, but it doesn't happen there. Maybe it could happen there. We'll have to see about that. Con equals n connect. We probably could put this con equals up in this elif section. Maybe not, though. I don't know for sure. It seems like it would make more sense. That siren is it's scared me. Below line. There's so many comments. It's just like this project has become like half comments. Caution comments, we're gonna get rid of those eventually. It's coming. Alright, so we have 7:14:25. Con equals n connect. Can we move this to be in the above elif clause so that it corresponds, so that this assignment corresponds with the alternative con assignment in the if connected to that clause. Review before moving. So let me see about that real quick. Let's see. Why do we not have that just done like already? Well, okay, because we have to have setup run first. I don't think we can. Yeah, we have to have. Whether starting a new game or reconnecting, set screen. Okay, so that's why we have it down here, is because we have to run setup first. Technically, we could handle it differently, right? Like we could. Technically, we could put these two lines in each if and elif, and then just run the con. You know what I mean? But I don't like to duplicate code. But it's like, I don't want to mess with this right now. Maybe later I will rearrange this, but I'm going to go ahead and say, after quick review the reason it must be placed here, ATM, is due to fact that this must happen after well, that's not actually true, is it? We don't actually have to we don't have to. We can run. We can connect. That doesn't have anything to do with having run setup first. But the database load function, now that does. That has to happen after. So we know that it has to be called after setup. That does. But connect, this doesn't. This could technically be called up here in the just like we do con equals here in the if start new game, it would be fine for us to, I think, put the con equals in the associated elif, right? Yeah, because this is if I start new game. Okay, so yeah, I would like it to be in one spot. It makes more sense. There's no reason to have and this also right here could probably be moved. Well, no, because we need it. We need it after the current game assignment. So this has to be here. Currently 90% sure, and I'm just gonna put seems like must be here because of necessity for having a current game assigned already. But honestly, I would like to have it in one spot. I would rather just go up here and say whenever we start the new game. Now, there's so many things, like, okay, so, for instance, this P1 game reference, will this actually work? Because, like, when we draw the screen, where is the, okay, so we pass in P1 game, and that's what causes it to run, and because that P1 game exists here in this client file imported, and because we pass it to the multiple choice function, that is what ends up making it so that the screen display will show this, right? You lift change entry to CS well is draw window main. Since the CS never calls this function, it actually just uses the main while loop. Since it never receives more data because SS is waiting. Is this dead code reviewed? And I don't believe this actually is executed, since the CS never calls this function. Well, it does though. It does now. It might not have then, but it does at this point, because this is prior to the assignment of current game. So, okay, so, right, so we have to have this section after this section. Because when we're reconnecting to the game, we get the client ID through loading it in. So we have to run this first before we can run this. Now, could we I mean, this is fine, honestly. I don't want to go and rearrange everything. But currently, this should work as is in client. When we do, like, we do P1 game, I just wonder, could we move this? Game ID exists if game ID is equal to 0. Could we move this below? Well, and we can't, because we have to make the choice using a visual display. So this section requires the prior section being executed first. This section requires the execution of the prior section first. So it has to be in this order. It has to. You have to have selected your choice before you could get your client ID, and you have to have your client ID to assign these current assignments. And also, like, so yeah, it implies that this is indeed the proper order. So we'll just put must proceed next section, just so in the future, if we wonder, must proceed next section after review determined must proceed next section. and this one must precede the next section. So, and that's basically the goal here, is to make sure we got everything nice and tidy before we, you know, add some code, review it, tidy it, add code, review it, tidy it. And that is the after review determine must precede next section. After review determine must precede next section. And then down here, yeah, we'll say the same thing. Well, yeah, it must precede the next section. After review determine must proceed next section. And this one determine must proceed next section. If current client soft reconnect bool is equal to false, whether starting a new game or reconnecting set to run in or set up. Determine must succeed prior section. And now I will not have to wonder about this again in the future. So yeah, we can move this connect though. There's no reason not to. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure. Like it's okay to do the connection. Right? Yeah, I mean I'm 99% sure. Can we move this in above your lift clause so that it's connected review before moving? After quick review, reason it must be placed here. ATM is due to fact this must happen after setup, but technically that's not true. We don't like this is not really contingent upon that. It doesn't rely on it. We can have this exist in a vacuum, like separately. Reconnect proper game through server. Do this while reapplying all other saved data. But how do we? So wait, how do we connect to the proper game though? Prior to so maybe this is necessary here, not because of setup though. Because what's happening is we're using connect, which we pass in local. I don't know. We'll figure out that arc. But what ends up happening through connect is that we return the network socket, which relies on the endpoint. So we have to have the endpoint, and the endpoint is the IP address. The IP address and a port combo. So I think we actually might have to have this done later after we have, well, okay, we have to have the client ID and the game. Don't we have to have the game ID? Okay, this has gotten confusing. All right, let me zoom back out and like go over this again. Okay, so because this is all being refactored, so it is kind of a mess right now, unfortunately. Because I'm using this token thing now, I have to think about this. Okay, so the client's going to reconnect. To a particular game. Each game on the server side is a sub-process. Each sub-process is each sub-process has its own port, right? Yeah. Each sub-process, whenever they connect to a new game, there's a new port, right? Let's see if we can find this code. Processes, child process ID, port. Okay, so we have port, and then we increment port, right? Yeah, so port plus equals 1. Increments port to be passed as the reconnect port arg to the child process so the clients can reconnect through it. Increments because one individual port per game child process. So you can have, and this is a networking thing, you can have many client-side clients connect to an IP port combo on the server side, which is also known as an endpoint, I believe, right? You can have multiple clients, client-side, connecting to the same IP port combo that is listening and accepting clients on the server side. Right? Is that not correct? Let me verify that. I'm pretty sure that's true. Python 3 socket, can't you have an endpoint? Can you have a server-side endpoint which IP port that can accept, connect multiple client-side clients connecting to that endpoint? You don't need a new port per client. You do not need a new port per client. Server side, you typically bind your server socket to a single IP port combination, and then you will listens for incoming connections on port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When a client connects, accept returns a new socket object that represents the connection with that specific client. And so, so on and so forth. And then the original server socket stays on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, accepting more clients. Each client socket may use any ephemeral port and IP, depending on the client origin, but the server doesn't need to care. Client side socket random ephemeral port. I don't know what this means. Clients typically do connect server IP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The OS assigns a random local port for the client socket. What distinguishes multiple client connections is the source IP, source port, destination IP, destination port. Tuple. So even though all clients connect to server 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, their source IP port will differ, making each connection unique. One server socket, one port. Many clients can connect to that same port. Each client gets a new socket object via accept. You don't need and shouldn't use a new port per client. So the client-side port doesn't matter. Correct. The client-side port number does not have to match the server-side port number. Okay, so this is actually, I think, news to me. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but it almost never does. When a client calls socket connect server IP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the OS automatically picks a random ephemeral port on the client side. Ephemeral means lasting for a very short time. The OS automatically picks a random unless you manually specify. The socket ends up bound to a connection like client IP 49532 server IP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can manually bind the client to a specific port before connecting. It's unusual for clients to do that, but this is almost never done unless you're doing something low level or weird like port prediction or simulating something. Why they don't match? The server needs a known port so clients can find and connect to it. The client just needs a unique local port for its side of the connection. The OS chooses one that's free. Okay, so this is kind of new to me because I know this is basic stuff, but I just implemented a system and I consulted ChatGPT first so that whenever we're reconnecting, we're actually reconnecting to the sub process instead of being redirected from the main process. The main process uses the main port IP combo, but each sub process uses a separate port but the same IP to allow the two clients associated with that process to connect directly to that process instead of having to be funneled through the main process first, through the main process IP port combo. So the goal was to have a separate port for each game. And can I just talk like that? So previously I asked you about setting up a new server IP port combo for each sub process because we are using multi-processing in the online game, wherein the main process uses one IP port combo, and then each sub process, which handles each game, which has two threaded clients, we want them to be able to connect directly to that sub process upon a disconnect and subsequent reconnect without having to be funneled through the main process first to improve code quality and reduce bloat. Concerning the fact that the client uses a random ephemeral port, how exactly do we connect to that specific endpoint that exists within the server-side sub-process if the port number doesn't actually matter? So previously actually by saying a new server IP port combo for each server because we're using multi-processing, wherein the main process uses one IP port combo and then each sub-process which handles each game which has two threaded clients. We want them to be able to connect directly to that sub-process upon a disconnect and subsequent reconnect without having to be funneled through the main process first to improve quality and reduce bloat. Considering that fact that the client uses a random ephemeral port, how exactly do we connect to that specific endpoint that exists within the server-side sub-process if the port number doesn't actually matter? Great. I remember multi-processing game design you're working on. You're absolutely right that the client's port doesn't matter. But to connect or reconnect to a specific server-side subprocess, the client must know the IP and port of that subprocess's socket, because the server is the one that listens and the port IP defines where the client connects to. You're doing this. A main process listens on a known IP port for initial client connections. After a game is assigned, a new subprocess is spawned to handle the game, which needs to accept client reconnections directly to reduce central routing bloat. Avoid routing through the main process after the game is established, possibly having its own listening IP port for clients to reconnect to later. You ask, if a client uses a random port and the server endpoint uses a fixed port, how can a client reconnect directly to that subprocess without having to go through the main? Clarification. Port matters on the server side. You're absolutely correct to care about the server-side IP port combo. When a client connects to the server, it must know the server IP port. The client's... Oh, okay, so I think... Was I just confused? Like, it was talking about the socket, like you but... I'm still a little confused here. Let's figure this out. I thought I had this figured out before, so now I'm like, wait a second. When a client connects to the server, it must know the server IP port. The client's source port is random, but the destination IP and port are how the connection is made. So the sub-process server must expose its own listening IP port that the client can connect to later. Okay, so the client does need to know that port. Okay. When a sub-process is started, it opens its own listening socket on a new port. You then let the client know which IP port to reconnect to for that game. Okay, that's good to know that is necessary. On reconnect, client skips the main process and connects directly to the sub-process. Okay, now the main process, Python def handle initial client, sub-process port equals find open port, sub-process p open, Python 3 game handler string, sub-process port, socket send all, okay, got you. Run game server sockets equals socket bind port, well listen to you guys in a second. Client side, s equals socket.socket, s connect server IP reconnect port. So but doesn't this contradict what they just said? You do need a distinct listening port for each sub-process if you want clients to reconnect directly to it. You do need a distinct listening port for each sub-process. So yes, each sub-process must bind to its own unique port. Clients must be informed ahead of time what port to use on reconnect. You do not need the client's port to remain the same. Just the server's port matters, because that's where connections are accepted. Use the OS to get a free port. The client's port is not important and is randomly assigned by the OS. What is important is the server-side port. You're correct to give each sub-process its own port, so clients can reconnect directly. Would you like help? Okay. So my question is, where do we type out the client port versus the server port? I don't understand how on CS when we do .connect server IP server port, how that involves a random client port. This touches on the setup of Cruise Board, how sockets work. When you do client socket connect server IP server port, you're explicitly specifying the server's IP import. You're explicitly specifying the server's IP import. Client socket.connect. The client's IP import are not specified manually. Okay. The OS assigns a random ephemeral port behind the scenes for you. Got you. So it's two sockets being connected. The client socket is being routed through a client port that is random, and it's connecting to the server side port. Okay, this assigned port becomes the source port in the TCP connection. Let's break it down. Imagine you're mailing a letter. You write the destination address, server's IP and port. You don't usually write your own return address, client port. The post office fills that in with a valid return address. How the client port is assigned. Unless you manually bind the client socket to a specific port, the operating system does this. Client socket equals socket.socket, socket connect server IP. under the hood, the OS assigns client IP, whatever your computer has, the client port or random port. It silently does this: client socket bind your IP, random pre-port. Then it connects to the target. Then it uses the client socket. Okay, gotcha. Okay, I understand. I understand now. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, I understand now. Gotta be nice to the AI, you know. Happy coding game dev. Yeah, I wasted a lot of time. Oh, man. Alright, so long story short, there is a client-side IP port combo that is behind the scenes that had nothing to do with what I was talking about. It was confusing. I see now what it meant. Anyway, so the real question was, does this rely so this relies on connecting to the proper endpoint, and the proper endpoint requires me knowing that reconnect port, right? Like, we have to have the reconnect port. After further review, this connect call requires knowledge of the reconnect port. I don't see that this information is gathered as it should be in the above section. And I'm pretty sure that needs to happen. Basically, up here, when we do the serialized client ID, game ID, because we're loading this in from the database, right? We need to, so we get our client token, and doesn't the client token contain the reconnect port? Shouldn't it contain the reconnect port? Does this contain the reconnect port? It should, shouldn't it? The below .connect call requires this information to be assigned to the n dot the n dot network endpoint, remote network endpoint, I believe, before it can be successfully run. So we'll say C line 359. We're going to stop right here. Yeah, I think that I thought we took care of that, but maybe we didn't, because we definitely do need to have that. So we're gonna stop right there. Line 434. Honestly, I feel like that session was not great. Honestly, I'm kind of upset about it. Okay, so that was not great, honestly. I'm kind of frustrated because it's just too much time spent reviewing code, honestly. It's a lot of this is that like rough section where I mean I got to the point that I think I needed to get to, which is figuring out that we have to add that reconnect port. I thought we already took care of that though, so that was a little confusing to me. I guess we didn't. I'll have to review that, but I'll review that next session. So yeah, we have to have that reconnect port for the client to reconnect right there. And yeah, it's just complicated, honestly. It's a lot. It's just a lot that goes on at the beginning section, and it's very nuanced and well, it's really important. So I got to make sure I get it right. And it's like 3 different files interacting with one another. So it's one of those things where it's just, you know, it's a lot to shuffle through. It's like having a big stack of papers. You got to have them in the perfect order, and you know, it's a lot of text on each piece of paper. Anyway, so session was not amazing, but what I do know now is I'm pretty sure I have to go back and get that reconnect port, and then we can use nconnect to connect to that, and then we can finish we can finally finish unpacking that token to like save all that information, to save the reconnect token and all that stuff. And yeah, we got to extract it from the payload and then save all that data so that whenever we do that connect call that we were just looking at on the client upon a reconnect, that we can load in that reconnect port from the database to connect directly to that sub process. Yeah, so we have a clear idea of what to do next, and it's progress, but it is just not the best anyway. So I'm gonna go eat a little bit more and a little snack. We're gonna go to the gym, and it's heavy bag day, so you know I always love that. And yeah, I'm probably not gonna do another session, honestly, because it's a little late. Maybe 30 minutes before I go to bed. We'll see. It depends.